Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast lovers. It's Friday again and time for a new episode. Well, it's every second Friday, but you know that by now. I have been carried away by the hype of blockchain. If you listened to the last episode, you know this. I really liked the way Deanna MacDonald explained the concept to me. So when I came back from Copenhagen, I decided to go and see a friend of mine who is a PhD and a senior lecturer in ICT-based transportation systems at Chalmers University. ICT being an abbreviation of Information and Communications Technology. His name is Per-Olof Arnäs, PO for short. And I asked him a little bit more about the digital transformation happening right now in transport. And more about the blockchain specifically, since that is where my mind is right now. It was on April the 11th that PO and I spent an entire day recording podcasts. PO has a podcast in Swedish about logistics. That is Logistikpodden. And I was invited as a guest, focusing on shipping and maritime, after I asked him to help me out in this episode. We had a great time. And here comes the 62nd guest in the 62nd episode of the Shipping Podcast. This is Per-Olof Arnäs. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
Well, hi, Lena. My name is Per-Olof Arnäs. I am a researcher at Chalmers University. I work mainly with the digitalization and the digitization because they are different in the transport industry. I have also been working in the haulage sector, road-based transport, for a number of years in industry. And since 6 years, I'm back in academia, where I'm now doing research and teaching within this very, very dynamic and exciting area. I also do a lot of other things, but I think we'll talk about that as well. So I'm also podcasting.
I know.
Yes.
You're a competitor.
No, I'm a colleague.
Okay. You're a podcast pal.
Yes.
Okay. What do you mean that there is a difference between the digital stuff? I thought everything was digital or analog.
I think this is in the English language, when you talk about digitalization. I know a lot of people use digitalization or digitization interchangeably, but they actually mean different things. In Swedish, we have one word, digitalisering, and it becomes very confusing for me as a researcher because I mean different things when I use these terms. Digitization is when you create digital information. You have information already out there, but you now convert it into a digital format. That's the digitization, to digitize something. But digitalization, that's when you increase the use of digital technology. You use more gadgets, more stuff. You use technology to solve everyday problems, for instance, or to create new opportunities. So there's a slight difference between these two ways of looking at it because you cannot digitalize without first digitizing something.
I just came from an interview with the newspaper, and I was drawing the conclusion that there is a difference between making a newspaper available online and working digitalized.
Yes.
Please explain.
I know there is this app or service called Issue, for instance. A lot of newspapers are using that, which is more or less a PDF browser for the web that you can use in your mobile phone. But it will still be you flipping pages in a virtual magazine. You still have the paper metaphor instead of just having web-based articles that will look different depending on what type of browser you have. Even if you can use such an old school technology as RSS, which is used to subscribe to information on the internet, to read the articles in your own format with your own fonts and your own layout. So you have to separate content from layout. I think this is at the core of what's happening in the transportation industry. Look at the term email. Email turns 60 years old now, today, or this year. Something like that, mid to late 60s. And we are still using email, and it's still called email, and we still have little envelopes depicting email applications. We are still using the same metaphor. We are sending an envelope with an address on, and within that envelope you have a message. The metaphor we use is a paper. We even use the term documents when we talk about information that we have on our computers. You have a Word document and so on. And as long as we keep these paper-based metaphors, we are actually constricting our way of thinking about information, because we really should be speaking about information and not documents, and access to information instead of receiving a document, if you understand the difference there.
Yeah, and you are an evangelist for digitalization. You've been talking about that for as long as I have known you, and probably even longer.
Yeah, I think I've been working around it in circles since the 1990s in different ways. And I mean, when we got the internet, I got the first web browser in 1994, the Mosaic web browser here at Chalmers. I was a student here then. And we didn't really know what to use of it, because it was sort of a bad mix between teletext and the yellow pages. It was worse than both those alternatives. So no one really knew what to use the web for. It was used for silly things at first. But then something happened when businesses started to migrate their business models online, and you saw that, okay, you can use this interconnected web of information nodes to do some really, really good stuff.
Now that I finally have put you in the chair, could you please talk a little bit about big data?
Yeah, big data is already an old trend. It's no longer an emerging technology. If you look at the Gartner hype cycle, big data was on top of the hype cycle, I think 4 or 5 years ago. And 3 years ago, it vanished from the hype cycle because it was no longer an emerging technology. So big data really is, the correct term for it is data science. This is when we use data, digital data, to perform analysis or to crunch this data, to process this data by using non-traditional means. So you can use statistical analysis, you can use probability analysis to find probable matches between different types of data, for instance. But you may not be absolutely certain. And the only way to make sense of some of these data is actually to visualize it in sort of a graphic format, because there are too many data points or too many numbers in order to comprehend it if you have it, let's say, in a table or something. So you need to visualize it. And in the transport industry, we are very fortunate that we have almost all of our data is geocoded, which means that you can put a longitude and latitude on almost any type of data that you have in the transport industry. And that means that we can use maps to visualize our information, which is a very handy tool. And then you can use different types of colors. And I mean, you've all seen these very, very cool infographics or animations of the world shipping during 1 year, or the world's airline traffic during 24 hours. And you can really, really see the scale of something when you do a visualization like that.
Even in shipping, yeah.
Especially in shipping.
I know.
Yes.
I know. I've seen it. I also spoken to Tristan Smith, who is doing those.
It's really impressive.
Yes.
I love those.
So how do you get in contact with the shipping industry? When did that happen?
Well, it first happened when I was a PhD student in the 1990s, because I worked in transport of dangerous goods.
Now you are revealing your age, Pio.
Yes, I'm 40-something, 8 this year, I think. I'm born in 1969, so in the 1960s, which is sort of, according to my kids, just when the dinosaurs started to die out. That's when I was a kid. So we had no internet, and yeah, I've been growing up with Commodore 64 computer in the 1980s and up until what we have now. And I was a PhD student focusing on dangerous goods in the 1990s. And you cannot be a PhD student focusing on dangerous goods without including a lot of shipping, of course. But I looked multimodal, so I didn't focus on one specific mode of transport. I looked at all of them, and my angle into it was, how could the logistics system or the transport system adapt to different types of goods? And in some systems where dangerous goods was the norm, the goods that were not classified as dangerous goods were actually the ones causing most administration. So and that was one of the things I looked at to flip the perspective, to look at transport systems from the other side. So actually I ended up going more and more into because I worked as a programmer also on my spare time and systems developer. So I learned object-oriented modeling, object-oriented programming, and object orientation. Today it's a standard when you model large systems, but it wasn't then. There was a community of modeling expertise coming from the computer science field that was emerging into management science and emerging into other areas where the computer science people really had the tools to model huge complex systems and making sense of them, because they had to in order to create software for them. So I took those tools and I adapted them to transport systems to say something about heterogeneous goods, which was what I ended up calling not dangerous goods, because goods could be homogeneous or heterogeneous depending on the system. So, and I looked a lot into shipping, of course, but not only shipping.
I know you're into logistics.
Yes, and transportation. There's a difference between those two as well.
Okay, please explain.
I'm saying that, okay, when you know that something is out moving in an infrastructure, a vehicle or a vessel, that's called traffic. That's the perspective of the public authorities. They want to regulate traffic. When you know from and to, and that you're out transporting goods, then it's transport. You're transporting goods between two addresses, 2 points on a map. When you also know why, you know what's in the box and where it's headed and who is going to use it, then that's logistics. So the transport industry mainly focuses on transport, moving things between addresses. They are not really concerned about why. That's the shippers, the companies buying transport services. They have logistics principles guiding their flows. Then you have, of course, transport logistics, meaning that you have flows to govern, and you have logistics principles governing the flow of resources in a vessel fleet, for instance, or how to reposition empty containers and so on. But the main difference between transport and logistics is that in logistics you know why, and in transport you know only from and to and maybe when.
Do you see digitalization coming into the logistical chain?
Oh yes, everywhere. I mean, we're in the middle of this huge transformation, because the benefits are so obvious of digitalizing and digitizing these systems, because there is so much manual work being done. And as you know, if you look at the haulage industry, road haulage industry, personnel costs is one of the top three, together with energy and capital investments. So those three make up for 2/3 or 3/4 of the total cost of haulage company. So, of course, if you can minimize the number of man hours doing things that a machine can do for you or an algorithm can do for you, you will save money. Look at the autonomous vehicles trend. We're just starting to realize the benefits, and we're starting to develop the technology to remove the driver from the vehicle.
Yeah. Everyone I meet, I ask them about the autonomous ships.
Yes,
and
of course.
I think, unfortunately, there has been some sort of mix-up because people call it unmanned ships. And then everyone is afraid of losing their jobs. Yeah. I think there will be other kinds of jobs, or their jobs will be a little bit different. But I don't really believe in unmanned ships.
We have no people working as lamp post lighters anymore, because we have machines to do that for us. I mean, if you can find a way for a machine or an algorithm or something to do a menial task that a human used to have to do because they had no tools to make it automatic. Well, once you can replace that task with something autonomous or something unmanned, you should do it, because humans are much better in doing other things than lighting lampposts or waking up people in church or whatever we used people for before we had machines to do it for us.
So you want to talk a little bit about the fourth industry revolution, because that is what we're talking about right now, isn't it?
Yeah, the digital revolution of manufacturing and transport. And if you really want to boil it down to what it's all about, you can say that it's about automation, that you let machines do things that are more and more complicated. Not necessarily complex, but complicated. There's a difference between those as well. Complicated, it's just that you can understand it, and you have a deterministic system. You know whether it will do the same thing every time you give it the same input. If you have a complex system, it's very hard to predict what a complex system will give you in terms of output when you give it the same input. So if you have a complex system like a kindergarten, and you serve them apples on Tuesday, and you see that half of them fall asleep by lunch on Tuesday, and the next Tuesday you serve them apples again, and no one falls asleep because it's a complex system. You cannot give them the same input and expect the same output. And the transport system itself is a complex system. But one thing, if you talk about this revolution, as you call it, one thing is that we have the way of automating to make technology solve everyday problems that we have in these industries. That's one thing. But then we have the digital side, where we learn how to make decisions based on facts in real time. And this has been sort of taboo in the transport industry. That's why we divide our cities into zip code-based zones. We have a batch logic in our terminals. We treat all the shipments exactly the same way because we really don't know how to make individualized decisions for each and every single container, for instance. That means that we treat all the containers in the exact same way until we actually have to look at the final destination of this container or who is allowed to pick it up. What we can do when we have digital information is that we can perform large-scale analysis of data in very short time frames, which also means, this is where big data comes in, for instance, which also means that we have the possibility to create real-time decision support. I always use an app to explain this. There is an app called Waze, which is a navigation app. It's now owned by Google since a few years back. But what Waze did, and others are following now, is that if you have the app running in your car when you're out driving, it will report your location and also, since it's reporting continuously, your speed and your direction and so on. So they will know that. And this is anonymous. So they don't know that it's actually you. They only know that someone is driving on this piece of road, this speed right now. That information is totally useless to you because you already know where you are and the speed you're driving. But since everyone is using this app, or enough people is using this app, they aggregate this data in real time and then they feed it back to the guy who is 10 minutes behind you, who has a meeting he's late for. And he has entered into his navigation system, I want to be in at this address at this time. And all of a sudden, you end up in a traffic jam. The system detects that you are now standing still on the freeway. That information is fed back directly to the guy who has his route planned, actually where you just had to stop because of a traffic accident. And he can get diverted and take another route to his meeting because it's based on real-time data from a very complex system like the traffic system. So this is one of the things that I think that the transport industry really, really needs to embrace, the possibility of making real-time decisions to change, to not be afraid of making last-minute changes, because if you have enough data, they are very low risk.
Do you see any transport system that is actually on the verge of adopting this?
Yes, public transport. Look at the city we're living in, Gothenburg. We have these information boards on every stop showing exactly how many minutes the next tram will be. And that's not based on timetables, that's based on measurement data. And we all have apps now to plan our travel so that we can optimize the shortest time between two addresses based on the actual state of the system. Not based on, well, if you plan ahead, it will use timetables. But once you're in sort of real-time mode, you will actually use the correct measurements and the actual positions of each tram and each bus in the system, in traffic. So public transport, I think, has succeeded in doing that in many cities because it's such a limited system. It's a limited data set. And the same company or the same organization at least controls all the vehicles. So it makes it easy, comparatively easy, to collect all the data. But if you look at the transport system in Europe, for instance, where I'm in the middle of a large EU-funded project now, looking into a digital ecosystem for freight transport in Europe. And when you look at the road-based transport company with the biggest market share, the largest market share in Europe, has below 5% of the market. It's an extremely fragmented industry with an extremely long tail. No one trusts anyone else. And that's why everyone is using their own systems, their own information gathering tools, their own business intelligence, and so on.
It sounds a little bit like the shipping industry, actually.
It's the same in all supply chains. This typical supply chain is a system where no one trusts anyone else.
Because 2 weeks ago, I listened to a ship owner from this town who said that soon there will not be any timetable on their RoPax ferries, because they will know when all the lorries are on their way that are supposed to be on that ferry.
Yeah, okay, so they can optimize based on their customers' needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I know.
I think, yeah. So, and one thing, and I know you want to talk about this, is how can we share information between actors that do not trust each other? And there are a number of ways to do that. And one of the things that many people are talking about right now is the blockchain technology.
Yeah, how will blockchain have an impact on the transport industry? Should we mention it as transport or logistics? I think transport.
Yes, supply chains, transport, logistics. It's a decentralized industry with a lot of data distributed all over the place. So there is no central actor with all the data. There never will be a central actor with all the data that everyone needs. So we have this system where it's complex, it's chaotic, and it's driven by thousands self-interests at the same time. And no one will accept a governance of these data. So you need to find decentralized solutions. I'm part of what's called the Digital Transport and Logistics Forum. It's an advisory body to DG Move, the European Commission. So we're a group of experts, I think 120, 130, some representatives of each member state in the EU. And we meet 2-3 times a year to discuss with the Commission and to look into the state of the art and what's happening. And 1 year ago, I mean, it's spring 2016, I asked about the blockchain technology at one of those meetings. It's a large plenary session with everyone has sort of headphones and microphones and country signs for each participant. It felt really official, but really it's a meeting among experts who all are interested in the same thing. But I asked about if anyone had considered the blockchain technology for information sharing. And people started laughing. This was 1 year ago. People started laughing because blockchain, to give an history about blockchain, it's the technology behind the Bitcoin cryptocurrency. And as everyone knows, Bitcoin is a currency not regulated by the banks, not under control of any governments. And it's totally anonymous, and you can use it to buy drugs and illegal weapons online. How can you base a serious government-sponsored system on that? No, will never happen. That's what people said 1 year ago. One person did not laugh. He was from IBM. And this was 1 year ago. And just a month ago now, IBM, as you know, and Maersk launched their blockchain-based information sharing platform. So this development has gone extremely fast. And what the blockchain technology is, I mean, it's on top of the hype curve now. So everyone expects it to bring world peace and solve the energy crisis and take us to Mars and everything. But of course, it will not do that. It has severe limitations. But one thing it's really, really good at is that you can create a common understanding, a common database or a common ledger, if you will, of data that all the participating actors agree on that this is the correct information that's written into this table. And the reason why these actors that do not trust each other, the reason why they can trust each other is that it's technically impossible to alter information in this table. The only thing you can do is add new information. You can never delete, you can never change anything that's already been written into this database. That's the technology behind it. And there are different ways to ensure this using the blockchain technology, but it's really simple. You can say that everyone becomes the auditor of everyone else or the reviewer of everyone else in the system, which means that if anyone tries to manipulate the blockchain, that's the name of this database, if anyone tries to manipulate it, it will be noticed immediately by all the others, and that change will not be permitted. So it's a really robust way of saying that, okay, any information that's written into this system, we know who wrote it, and it can never change. It doesn't say that the information is true. So if someone says, let's say in Singapore, I've loaded the container with this ID on this ship, and they write that event log, because the blockchain will be an event log, more or less. They write that event in the blockchain, and it gets added to the blockchain, and it will always be on the blockchain on that date, on that time, that actor wrote that they had added this container to that ship. Then you can trace that container back through history. If you have the right credentials, if you have the right access, the information in the blockchain can easily be encrypted so that you can only read the information that you are supposed to have. But let's say that the container that was loaded onto that ship had a different number, or that it wasn't loaded on the ship at all. It never arrived in Southampton. Then you can always go back to the last known actor, say, okay, the information you put into the blockchain turned out to be false. So you always know the last guy who left the building didn't turn off the lights. You know who that was. So you have a traceability. And of course, if you look at it from a transport management perspective, it's about managing where are our assets. At this moment, you can have it as an asset tracking tool. Our trailers have checked in here and there and so on. Our containers are positioned everywhere, and our ships and so on, and vessels. But you can also look at it from a supply chain management perspective. Where is our cargo, and what have our cargo or our products been experiencing through their journey towards the end consumer? But you can also use it as a footprinting tool. Let's say I buy a shirt in the local H&M store. If there is a barcode on that shirt on a note somewhere, I could scan that with my mobile phone, and I would get the full history of that garment. If this is realized, this way of tracking, because all of that information from the cotton farmer to the haulage company who made the delivery, if all of them scan an ID on a box or something, and that ID then, of course, is associated with the product inside the box, and they all have their separate identities, you could have hyperlinked information. That means that if you click on the shirt, so to speak, you get to find the box the shirt was in. And once you found the box that the shirt was in, you find the pallet, and the pallet has an identity. And once you find the pallet, you can find the container. Once you find the container, you can find the producer, and so on and so forth. And this, of course, takes place electronically. You have no human being looking into this. This is taken care of by software, of course, to make this research for you, so that when you're in the store and you scan the can of tomatoes, you could get the carbon footprint if it has been recorded during the lifetime of that can. So that's how you can use blockchain for supply chain transparency and for tracking and tracing and logging what happens in systems.
And I am thinking of bill of lading.
Yes.
I'm thinking of document.
There's a company called Wave who has launched a blockchain-based bill of lading system. The bill of lading is a very complex document, as you are very much aware of. You know more about bills of lading than I do, but it has multiple functions. It's a deed of ownership, but it's also a way bill, what's been loaded on the ship, but it's also...
It's a
negotiable. Yeah, you can sell it. And that's the big crux with bills of lading, because whoever has the piece of paper can pick up the cargo.
And no one else.
And no one else. So there must be no copies. There must be no question about who has the original. And as you know, one of the things that digital is very good at is making exact copies that cannot be distinguished from the original. And one way of handling that is, of course, to use a blockchain, because then the last entry connected to this ID, which a bill of lading is essentially an ID, the last entry shows the current owner. That will be timestamped, so if ownership is changed during a voyage, which it is frequently, then you will know also at the exact time of, let's say, an accident, or you get some sort of claims situation where the goods are destroyed, you have a storm or something like that, then you will know who owned the cargo at that point in time. And you have to meet all these requirements, and you have to be able to replace the paper-based bill of lading with a system that is not just equally robust, but more robust.
It's a buzzword right now, and I read last week that the Danish Maritime Fund is actually funding a research group in Copenhagen on the subject of blockchain. But when will it be here? When will the transportation system start using it, do you think?
Maersk started a few months ago. If you look at blockchain for what it is, it's not an IT system. It does not solve any algorithmic problems that you might have. It does not do your optimizations for you or your planning for you. It's only a way of ensuring that information is shared in a secure way between parties who do not trust each other. If you use it for that, you could implement any type of information sharing scheme that you have in supply chains or between companies. Could, of course, instead of storing those in a cloud-based database somewhere, you can store them in the blockchain. A copy of the blockchain, this database, is stored, identical copies are stored at every node, at every user of this blockchain. And the more users you have, the more secure the system will be. So you have no centralized storage. You have the storage at the shipping line, at the forwarder office, at the shipper's office, and so they all have the exact same copy of the blockchain. That's how it works.
Then makes me think about payment and bank transactions and things like that.
Fintech, the bank industry, is extremely interested, of course, and are putting a lot of money, development money, into blockchain technologies because they see that the role of the clearinghouse is maybe a thing of the past soon. The clearinghouse being like Visa and MasterCard, who everyone trusts. And that's why we would gladly send our transactions through MasterCard or American Express, because we trust American Express, and the vendors that we use our plastic card to pay, they trust American Express, and the bank who holds my money trusts American Express, and American Express gets a percentage of each transaction because you have this clearinghouse in the middle that everyone trusts. Now, with blockchain technology, you don't need a clearinghouse because the exact same information, who pays what to whom, is distributed among a network instead. And of course, the banks are seeing this as a potential disruption of their business model. So they are looking into how can they use this to their advantage? How can they use blockchain technology?
And as you were saying before, we are using emails with a little envelope and so on. Why are we using plastic cards to transactions for money?
We're actually leaving those behind in Sweden at the moment. We have this system called Swish, where we use our mobile phones to make payments. And if you look at other parts of the world, like in Africa, for instance, where they never took the step of introducing the plastic cards, they went directly to bank on mobile, a decade before we managed to do it here. The physical representation, the plastic card, is just a stepping stone towards a more digital solution.
So how do you see the future of shipping? I mean, you are into the future all the time, but shipping.
When I give talks, I almost always say that it's very hard to email cargo somewhere. We cannot teleport yet. And even if we manage to teleport stuff, it will probably be too expensive to do that in a foreseeable time frame. So we need to ship stuff around. And the container, which also turns, I think, 60 this year or last year, has truly revolutionized global trade, of course, and will continue to do so because we can, at very low cost, buy things where they are cheapest to produce and in quantities that are so large that we only have to order one container of backpacks to be able to fill our market needs for the next season, for instance, for a sports utility store or something like that. I mean, the threshold is so low now when it comes to importing that we will have these large physical flows for the foreseeable future. But our decision-making processes will be more digital. Look at slow steaming as one of those trends where you actually say, I want to take an extra week going to the Far East. That will put strain on the shippers and the customers of that shipping line because they have a week less to make their planning. So what happens is that they need to have a better decision-making process, like in the confection industry, when you have, as it is today, very tight schedules where you have to order your spring collection in October to make sure that it will arrive in January. Now you need to order it in September. And that will, of course, put a strain on those types of companies, because they have to be even more before and anticipate even longer time periods where they have to do prognosis and so on. And prognosis are very inexact science.
And if the slow steaming was a saving cost on fuel for the ship owner, it gave more costs on other parts of the logistical chain, I understand.
Probably. Could do. But also, what I'm saying is that you could actually plan better. You could use information to make better decisions closer to the deadlines. Let's say when we introduce EInvoicing, when you have a digital production chain in a transport company, where you have, let's say that you sell landfill, which is a common business model for regional transporters. I mean, it's the most common goods type that we have. It's landfill. I think 30 to 40% of all shipments are actually landfill being transported. And that's a very complex type of transport because it has no barcodes. It's very hard to digitize. And you have a mix between product and service that's being produced. So it's a very complex way of doing it. Previously, and I'm talking 10 years ago, when you had a truck doing this type of assignments, they were selling landfill to a construction site, for instance. And they did like 30, 40 of these trips per week, something like that. Every Friday, they took the paper slips with all the specifications of what they had done, how many hours, how many kilometers, how much landfill they delivered each time, because they charge for the landfill as well, not only the transport service. And perhaps 10 days later at best, which means up to maybe 20, 30 days after the fact, an invoice was sent to the customer. And that invoice had a credit of 30 days. So it could take up to 60 days before they actually got paid for the service. Now, let's say that the information is digitally recorded and transferred here. That means that as soon as the driver unloaded one of his trips, information about the kilometers, the hours, the amount is directly transferred to the invoicing department. And the invoice is electronically generated in the same instant. And the invoice is sent electronically to the construction company in the same instant. And they can still get 30 days of credit. But then you have reduced the credit time by 30 days. If you can reduce the credit time by 30 days in any business, calculate that together with your annual turnover. And just look at the interest rate, even if it's low, how much money you will make on actually processing information faster. That's where the money will be. And you will lose a lot of administrative cost as well, because you will have a scalable model. That's why we are scanning our own groceries in the supermarket. And that's why we pay our bills on the internet, because there is no transaction cost for the bank or for the grocery store, because we as customer do the transactions ourselves. And then you will become more or less infinitely scalable within those systems, and they can perform other tasks instead of just sitting in a chair waiting for the next customer to pay something. The systems need to be transformed from handling individual transactions to be more handling data and making real-time decisions. And that includes the confection industry.
Do you think that the business model will look the same in the future?
There are many business models out there, and there are many business models in need of maybe some tuning up, because we have a lot of the business models in trade, for instance, or when you get close to the consumer industry, consumer-based products are based on physical stores, physical trade. And we see e-commerce now is growing with up to 20% per year. Even though it's still a small part of the consumer trade as a whole, it grows with 20% per year. And a lot of that growth is taking place within organizations that are less than 10 years old. And these organizations have a few things in common, but one of them is that they generally understand customers better than the old-fashioned physical industry. And I think you can translate that insight into other industries as well. There are in the transportation industry now emerging companies all the time. So it's not unique for now. It's been happening for quite some time. There are companies emerging now who have no assets. They have no physical assets. They own no trucks, no ships, no containers. They only have computers and people. They are probably under 30. They are young. They are without background in the industry. they have no history within the transport industry. At least not a long history. They may have a father or a mother who have been working in the industry, but they have, in general, a different background than the ones who have spent their life in a certain industry. It could be haulage, it could be shipping, it could be forwarding or something like that. And they have absolutely no respect for traditions, for how things always have been done. And they have absolutely no understanding of people saying, well, we tried this in the 1990s and it didn't work. Well, let's try it again, they say. Let's transport things by bikes. Let's use the inland waterways in the city to transport cargo now that we are building all over the city. Let's do this. Let's have an app that we will give to drivers so that they can perform deliveries at night when they have spare time, and so on and so forth. So this whole sharing economy is one of those trends, is transforming industries, and sometimes before the legal system catches up, of course. So we're in the middle of one of those. But those developments are needed. And this industry has been very comfortable in handling business the same way it's always been handled. And if you look at the banks have been much more prone to change than the transport industry. That's why we have, at least in Sweden, and I think most places, we have no bank tellers anymore. We have no cash in the banks. If you want to withdraw cash in Sweden, you have to go to Forex, which is a sort of an exchange office for currency. So all the banks have contracts with Forex because they handle cash. Banks do not handle cash anymore. But if you look at the transport industry, they have been so complacent and so comfortable for so long handling their business model as they always had. And now we are seeing small actors without respect understanding the customers better. And they are taking over the customer. The same companies are still performing the transport services, but they are doing it under new management. The management is another company.
Yeah, and I see those newcomers, the small new businesses, challenging the big ones, the old ones.
And they do not understand the threat.
No, yes, in a way, depending on. Some of the forerunners have actually adopted the way of thinking from the young generation that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are employing them. And some of them are, I can see it. I mean, for instance, with the engine manufacturers,
mm-hmm.
They are building ecosystems, a lot of digital things there, and other parts of the shipping industry. I came back from a conference when I met a lot of people who thinks like you do, like I do. And they have actually seen these changes and these trends, and they are trying to do something about it.
I mean, it was, I think, 2 years ago, that you were a guest in my podcast. I have a podcast on logistics in Swedish, so we are not competitors. And I look into a lot of different things. But there you talked about how the shipping industry was still a handshake business.
Yes.
They were slowly entering Twitter, the CEOs, very reluctantly. And they were very skeptical towards everything that was digital because it was in conflict with their way of doing business. But you also said that in a few years, there will be a change. And it's been a few years now.
I see the change. Oh my God, I've met so many like-minded people now.
Mm-hmm.
And I see what's happening. And it makes me happy.
I've seen it too.
There's so many opportunities now.
So we look into an industry where you have a large physical component. You have this extremely long-term, extremely risky investments in large vessels, in ports, in handling equipment. And that industry meets a consumer mindset who is extremely short-sighted, where product lifespan, especially when you look at electronics or confectionery, is less than 1 year. And then a new product will catch everyone's attention and generate new transport flows. And I'm seeing now bridges forming between these two. Very different systems with different speeds. But I'm not really sure if there will be a big change in the shipping industry, or if this will be sort of a creeping, slowly developing. And all of a sudden, I mean, you have the big ones like Maersk going into the blockchain, but that's merely a way of securing that information is accurate in their system. That could have been done in different ways, but I know that IBM wants to scale this up to other industries so this is a learning opportunity for everyone involved. But if you look at the true digitalization of where I actually can scan my groceries and get their history, that's a bit off still. But the shipping industry will be a really, really big part in that development. It has to be.
Yeah. And I think it's happening. I think it's going to be a big change because we've been in such a bad economy for such a long time.
Mm.
We have had a depression within the industry and we are not seeing the cycles that it always has been. It's going to be different.
Mm.
And I think the people who understand and who gets on the train now will survive. The other ones won't. Because I think we're going to see a totally different industry. The assets might be owned by some people and the rest might be owned by other companies.
Yeah. The whole ownership, the generation, my kids' generation who grew up now, they view the concept of ownership differently than I do and my parents and their generation before those. They value access, not ownership. They would never buy a song on a piece of plastic that I did when I bought singles. And they never understand. Actually, we had DVDs when they were smaller, but now they have fully converted into a streaming economy where they pay a monthly fee for access. And what happens when that extends to products as well? What happens when I say, okay, I don't need a new car. I will pay for access to mobility instead.
Yeah.
That will impact global trade when that business model takes over, which I think it will. In some cases in cities, for instance, there you will have pooling of resources and you use digital technology to make that pooling of resources to keep the service level equally high to owning your own car, for instance. If you can ensure with 99% certainty that you will always be able to find a suitable car for your needs within 10 minutes of where you live in the city, why would you own a car paying 10 times the price?
Yeah, and I think that the car companies have started to realize that.
Yes, of course.
Look at the car rental industry. They are now working together with others. It's so interesting to see the new collaboration platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Unexpected, not marriages, but unexpected collaboration. That is exciting, I think.
Yeah. I always come back to the Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times. That's the worst thing you can wish upon someone. But I think it's a double-edged because I don't think I would like it in an uninteresting time where everything stays the same and today is always the same as yesterday. So I used to say I love the 21st century because everything is better now. People are looking back nostalgic when we played with sticks in the woods when we were kids and every kid has a mobile phone now. Well, everything is better now. I'm sorry. That's my view. We are progressing. Even if progressing also means that change comes faster and human beings are not made for fast change. Evolution-wise, we are still the same persons as we were a few thousand years ago. Biologically, we will tame technology to do our bidding more and more efficiently to extend our lives and solve the day-to-day problems and to make our lives better.
I want to ask you, how could shipping become more visible? Because that's my standard question. Do you think that we are hidden?
In some way. I'm living in Gothenburg, which is sort of the shipping capital of Scandinavia. So, of course, shipping has a prominent place in our city.
Yeah, maybe our Norwegian friends now will, and our Danish friends now will.
So I'm a bit biased. And then I'm working in the logistics field, so I see a lot of shipping, and every time I see a newspaper article, I notice it. But what I think is that most people are now noticing this industry in different ways. Some of it because there are a lot of news right now. Labor conflicts and so on. That, of course, puts a highlight on the industry, not in a very positive way. But also, people are becoming more and more aware of importing stuff. And is it really sustainable? And people are looking at local sourcing of food and so on. So there is a growing awareness of where stuff comes from. And of course, that's one of the things that the shipping industry needs to deal with in the future, to communicate, because it's a sustainable transport alternative compared to flying or to trucking or any other transport mode. But there is a growing public opinion against importing.
Then I could tell you that 60% of what is transported on sea is energy in some shape or form.
We need to tame the sun also, which means that we need to stop shipping around liquid energy because we need to generate electricity as local as possible to power the things we need powering. And of course, the vehicles will be electric in the future. And I'm talking about cars now. And our houses are already electrified, most of them. But we need to find the electricity somewhere else than in fossil fuel.
I'm happy that you say that we are not invisible.
Oh no, you're not. But since the port is always in a different part of town from where people live, they see the trucks going on the freeway. They see the trucks making deliveries to the grocery stores. So when you talk about transportation, the first thing everyone thinks about is public transport. But when we say, okay, not people, goods, okay, then it's delivery of pallets to the local grocery store. That's what everyone thinks about. Or they think about the e-commerce that they get delivered to their house or a drop point somewhere. And when you say that, okay, most of the things you see around you now has actually been on a ship, they get really surprised because that's not part of the public perception of what transports are, because they don't see it in their day-to-day life. I think that's very hard to make people see things without actually taking them there and showing them. This is a port. We have 3,000 containers every Tuesday arriving here.
When we have these very big container vessels here in Gothenburg, there is a queue of people who wants to go and see it.
People living in Gothenburg, which is a sort of a maritime city where we have a strong maritime tradition. So, of course, in Gothenburg, you have a public awareness. But if you go into the hinterland, where you have no port access, you may have a dry port now in some cities where you have rail access, but they do not have this natural connection to, and most people live in the hinterland. They don't have this natural connection to the sea. For them, I think it's a bit more tricky to get the awareness of the impact on global trade and their daily life that the shipping industry has, because it is a big impact.
Who do you think I should interview the next time?
I think you should interview Col Heath. Col Heath is at Interactive Institute here in Gothenburg, and he also has a podcast together with Anders Thoresson called Digitalization, where they dissect the digitalization in the world right now. And he's very active in informing about this. He has this Facebook group called Digital Societal Knowledge, which is sort of where everyone in Sweden who wants to know what's hot and what's going on, they are a subscriber to this Facebook group. So Col Heath is my tip for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pio. I think this was a great conversation. I hope our listeners think the same, but I'm sure. So if they want to follow you on Twitter, what's your Twitter handle?
It's Dr. P.O., Dr_P.O. On Twitter. I'm mostly active on Facebook, actually. There are too many trolls on Twitter. But I also have my podcast in Swedish, Logistikpodden, but it's in Swedish. So for those of you who understand Swedish, you're very welcome there.
And if you want to reach Pio, just contact me and I will make sure that you get in contact with him.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I can now tell you how envious I am with Pio. He has transformed his office in the university into a podcast studio. He has got loads of tech and gadgets. He loves that. And they are all in there. And it's so easy to just jump in and press record and start. Me, on the other hand, I must go and see my guests. I bring my little Zoom H2 microphone and I put clip microphone on my guests. And then I keep my fingers crossed that there is not too much noise in the background, disturbing the recording. After that, I go back home and I do my post-production. Recording intro and outro works best if I'm in my wardrobe, where all the clothes gives me a perfect noise background. That is no noise at all. Yes, you heard me right. I go into my closet to record. Mind you, it's a walk-in closet, but it's probably not what you expected. There are so many things that I do to make this play in your ears. You will not believe it if I tell you. I know what you are doing for me. You are downloading or streaming, and you are listening. That means the world to me. I'm so grateful. I believe you also spread the word about the Shipping Podcast once you got the hang of it, and that is priceless for me. I hope you have a nice summer. I am busy with my 2-year anniversary episode and a few other things. Take care, enjoy the summer. From me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.